Hey, Chris.
Anthony, it's great to see you.
I've had a rough morning.
Why are you blue, Anthony?
I've had a rough morning. I saw my psychiatrist this morning.
Yeah,
and he told me I was crazy.
Okay.
And I asked him for a second opinion, and he says, "Okay, you're ugly too." It's been a rough morning.
It's
Emotional, damn it.
I love the fact that you'd set up the video to play after your own joke. You'd set the joke up and then been ready to go.
I remembered last minute that we have that clip, so I went ahead and played it.
That's a great start to the episode. Anthony, it does feel like we've had to cancel some shows lately. I wonder if the word's getting out with our guests. But Stephanie hasn't got that word yet. So, Anthony, what if the business you're killing yourself to build is actually worthless to anybody but you? In 1995, John Sylvan invented the K-Cup, revolutionizing how Americans consume coffee. After growing Keurig for just a few years, he sold his stake for a mere $50,000 due to health issues. By 2018, Keurig had sold over 60 million K-Cups, leaving Sylvan to watch from the sideline as his creation generated billions in value he'd never see. His lack of exit planning turned what could have been generational wealth into pocket change. Today on Out of Founder, we're going to be talking about building your business with the end in mind. I am Chris Franks. With me today, as always, is the emotionally damaged Mr. Anthony Franco. Anthony, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Chris. I can't believe that our intro says that 50K is pocket change. That doesn't sound like pocket change to me.
You know, when you're super rich like Stephanie, so like
you're right.
Stephanie Hayes is our guest today. She transforms income-focused businesses into wealth-creating assets through her firm Assets to Exits. Great name for a business. After buying her first business and building a software company, she's now exiting. Stephanie helps established founders escape the growth plateau by shifting from revenue obsession to value creation, preparing for exits most never thought were even possible. Stephanie, where have you been my whole life? I feel like, had a few exits you could have helped me with down through the years, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm not.
You know what? The universe brings us together when we need each other. So,
Stephanie, let's just talk about it. I'm early stage founder. So much of the narrative is about us building, growth. Just keep growing. Don't worry about anything else. Just growth solves all problems. Why should I even kind of have this exit thing in the back of my mind? Shouldn't I just grow as fast and as big as I possibly can?
Because at some point in time, you get burned out on that. At some point in time, you stop and you go, what am I doing? And, maybe you get to a point where you're being forced to exit because you're either emotionally damaged like Anthony, or you have a life circumstance or what have you. And then you're sitting with a business that maybe you grew, maybe you did well, but you're going to take what you take. You're going to get what you get, right? You don't get upset. But what I find a lot of founders do and a lot of business owners do is they kind of get 5 to 7 years in. And let's face it, not every person who starts up a business is a business person, right? And so we follow the path that we've been taught, or we follow the path that others have followed. And at some point in time, we get to this place where we're like, what am I doing, right? Like, where am I going with this? And
I ask that question every time I do this podcast, Stephanie.
Yeah, every day, pretty much. Yeah. And so what we have the opportunity to do when we start thinking about exits long before you have to actually make one is we work backwards from that end goal, and we actually do like a benchmark valuation, whether it's an ST valuation or something like that. The benefit of doing that and getting the information that you get from understanding that target valuation is not so much on the financial side, but it's like where are all of the risk adjustments coming from, and so therefore where are all the opportunities and the challenges that we have in the current business model that we can address and build a much more valuable business for an eventual exit. So I think people think about exits far too late in the game, and when they think about it much earlier in the game, then they can start putting intentional work into a growth strategy that is not just about how can I throw more money into marketing so I can get more dollars inside the business. And I think the benefit of doing that too is that it opens up a whole new world of opportunities. I was working with a founder who she's got sort of a three-year plan, and when we looked at it, what we realized is that if she could address the lack of diversification in her revenue channels, the lack of diversification in her customer base, she would eliminate a couple of risk items on her valuation that would probably double her revenue, right? Or her valuation eventually, right? So starting from that perspective, I am most interested in the growth strategy. I am most interested in what we can do when we start thinking about exits long before we have to make them.
Anthony, it's bizarre. It's so funny that we applaud the exits. We applaud, like, this company went and exited. But really, it's nothing we teach. We don't think about it early in the journey. And I didn't know how to sell a company until I sold the company. And of course, I made tons of mistakes and, trusted people I shouldn't. And, famously, had a terrible outcome after that first sale of a company. But how do you think about it? Did you think about exiting or even valuations earlier in some of your first companies, or is it something you do now?
Well, I mean, the value is always what I think it is. Like, I don't even have to think about valuation because whatever I imagine in my head, that's what I sell the company for. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've been a part of some big exits and small exits. I've run the gamut. And I really like what Mark Cuban says about exits. When founders are asked what their exit strategy is, most founders don't know. And some investors or some people think that's a bad mistake, but a lot of founders don't get into, to your point, Chris, get into running a business in order to exit it. It's not why that's not why most people start. So it's not top of mind. And Stephanie, you put it brilliantly. You're not thinking about the exit. Like, I put it a different way. You're going to exit your business one way or another. You're going to exit either by choice or not. So why don't you have a hand in it? Why don't you plan it a little bit? So my first exit was actually absolutely that same way, Chris, where I went into it and was like, oh yeah, maybe we should. It wasn't even a plan. Somebody came to us and offered money for the business, and we were like, yeah, sure, why not? So I got lucky, right? But then I started to realize, hey, if we plan for this strategically, we could have better outcomes, and that turned out to be true.
Stephanie, so much of the stuff we talk about, and really kind of one of the underlying purposes of the show, is that there's been narratives, but they haven't been about founders. They've been about more driven by investors and kind of this idea of these moonshots, et cetera. But what you're saying to me makes a ton of sense, which is we need to start understanding and taking control of what we want to build. And I think you're saying that starts very early in the process.
So we were talking about this before we went live and how old we all are, and we're all obviously in the grandparent stage. But I grew up in the .com, the .com boom and the .com bust. I grew up in the technology sector. I have a master's degree in the management of technology. So you get to see a lot of this stuff happening a lot, and so for me, the idea of buying and selling and exiting businesses was just sort of part of my experience. But I'll tell you that most of the most of the business owners that I come across have never even considered it to be an option for themselves. And they get into it to build a job for themselves. And then it becomes a business, and then it becomes something, broader, but they don't think that an exit is for them. They think it's a VC backed, tech bros in the Silicon Valley, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. The reality is, and Chris or Anthony, you might argue with me on this, that you can technically sell any kind of business, right? Like I've bought businesses for $500 on a marketplace, and so there is a market for most types of business. Are you going to get a lot for it? That's the other side of the coin. But just having the conversation with these business owners to even bring this into the realm of possibility for them is a huge first step, because it's heartbreaking to see how many, especially service-based business owners, how they get to a point where they don't know what their next step is, and they haven't really thought about it, and they're burned out and blah, 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 and they just shut everything down. And they kind of have this idea that when I stop, everything stops. And that's such a heartbreak, because the asset side of this conversation is that every business is building assets inside of the business as you go. The business that I bought 2 years ago, I actually bought the assets of the business. I didn't buy the full entity itself. And so that's a possibility as well. So there's all these ways to start building value inside your business and move away. Like, yes, of course, we want income and revenue, but moving away from that being the sole focus of your business, I find gives people almost like a renewed energy inside their business, a renewed perspective on their business, and gives them something to work towards. This all came from like lamenting the fact that in my divorce, I lost my house. And so, when was I going to get back into the real estate market here, which is insanity, right? So how could I build something else that had the same kind of value that I could contribute to, that would grow in value over time? Well, I can buy and sell and renovate businesses. So this became like, super interesting to me. And then as I dug into it, I realized that there's this asset foundation to a business that makes it infinitely more valuable. And, I've got a little freebie you can have for your audience if you like, around 9 different types of assets you can build inside your business. But that shift in focus has turned a lot of my clients into, much different business owners making different decisions. Are they all out there to build some massive, corporation? Not at all. But it really shifts their focus, and it really makes them feel like they're working towards building something, as opposed to just chasing the next marketing strategy that's going to get more dollars in the door.
The other piece of this, and just to acknowledge it, is there's a flip side to this, which is there's business owners that have built companies and it's their single retirement strategy. Like they don't have any money outside of this. And then they go at some point and be like, gosh, how much is this thing worth? And it's not worth what they thought it was going to be, or they didn't do the work early on to put in a position where it was worth what it could be, right? And I think can be equally tragic.
Totally. And the asset strategies and the asset inventories I do with my clients are really working backwards from what somebody would be willing to pay for, right? And who that buyer is, there's a lot of variation and a lot of variables there in terms of who you want to sell to. But I also, want to point out that selling your business is only one exit strategy, right? Like you could do an operational exit where you take yourself out of the business but retain ownership. That's still an exit, and that's still a departure from the business. And so, the most important thing is that we want to sit down with our clients and we want to be able to understand, for them as individuals, as business owners, as founders, what is most important to them? Like, what are they looking for? A big, massive, financial exit 5 years down the road, or do they want to sort of slowly turn this into a legacy business they can hand off to their kids? Like, those are two really different strategies. And what we focus on in terms of growth over that next 5 to 10 years is going to be determined by what they're really interested in doing. And then there's like a whole gamut of other types of exits that you can make. And so I think just, primarily it's about the looking ahead and having a plan and working toward. I know I do much better if I know what I'm working towards. And I think that that's the same for most business owners. And I just think it's heartbreaking how many people have just kind of walked away from their business because they didn't know that was an option for them.
Anthony, I mean, it feels like it's almost the last thing that we think about when we start a company. Like at this point, when you start a company, do you have an exit strategy in mind? Are you already sort of thinking about what this thing wants to be when it grow up, or what you want out of the business? So I feel like so often we as founders, we talk so much about the business and leave what we want to get, the people that are taking the biggest risks, that are going to be working the hardest in the business, we just kind of push that aside.
Yeah, I suffer from the delusion that what is in my head is actually going to be what is going to exist in 10 years. Yes, I absolutely do that every time I start a business. And, then you get punched in the face and, and things change. So
You're living in a really violent business world, if that's what
down here in Colorado, it's pretty rough there, Stephanie.
I live in Squamish, British Columbia. Okay, it's like outdoor recreation capital of the world. We get pretty tough and rumbly around here too.
We'll put our Cowboys against your lumberjacks and just see who's tougher, I guess. No, I mean but metaphorically speaking, you do get punched, right? Like it's tough. So Stephanie, let's go back to the kind of foundations here. I'm thinking about a company. I'm getting started. I'm trying to figure it out. What do you coach people to do to, even in the very earliest stages, what questions should I be asking myself?
Well, I don't think there's a too early time to even be thinking about what that longer term plan is, right? Does it mean you're going to have the answers when you're first starting up? No, you're going to be focused on, screwing up a whole bunch of stuff and, having some experimental stuff. But, what I built inside of my Assets to Exits program was this like entrepreneurial exit journey. And, whether you're at phase 0, where you're just starting to think about what it is that you're building, your focus is going to be spent much more on trying to figure out what the business is and the business model is. But there are certainly some things that you can be thinking about even that are going to help you make better decisions. And I think we're all going to screw up a bunch of stuff in our early days, and we're all going to run experiments and try things and learn and blah, blah, blah. But we can minimize a lot of that if we are a little more focused on where we're going. And maybe you don't have the numbers then, and maybe you don't know what that's going to look like then, but at least if you're thinking about what the long-term plan is for your business, is this something I want to hand off to my kids? Is this something I want to make a quick buck on? Those are all different strategies, and the decisions that you make along the way are going to be affected by what that sort of long-term thinking is. So of course, early on, it's going to be a little more conceptual. And then in each of these sort of 7 phases that we go through on our exit journey, we're going to get closer and closer to defining that. But I want to define it far enough in advance that we can actually make some impact and change the final outcome whenever that's going to be.
I mean, I think that this does kind of get to the point, which is sometimes along the way, if you're not thinking about the destination, it becomes harder to make those changes later, right? Like I'm thinking, even just financial accounting and how you keep your books, and to your point, building assets versus just cash coming into the business. It's easier if you start earlier, right? I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not naive enough. I mean, maybe I am, but I'm not naive enough to think that, we're gonna make a pristine business from the word go, and all your ideation is going to be a straight line and all that sort of thing. No, you have to experiment. You have to have some meandering pathways. But certainly, we want to keep that a little more straight line, as opposed to we want everything to be in alignment and support itself as you grow. So I do think that there's a way to get there faster, and I think that there's a way to get there with more intention. But I think a lot of people don't start thinking about that until much, much later on, until they feel forced to.
Chris, I have something that I want to ask you, Stephanie. So for everybody, you might not know this, but I'm also a business broker, right? So I help entrepreneurs sell and exit their businesses too, and I find the advice that I hear other brokers give, and I've heard these words come out of my mouth as well. Well, if you want to exit for more, you need to grow. And it's like, well, no kidding, to put it for PG friendly terms. Yeah. Oh, so you want more assets and you want to have higher revenue and be more profitable. It's like, well, yeah, thanks for that great consulting advice. How much do I have to write a check out for? So, Stephanie, when you're talking about, building a business that you can exit, what you're really talking about is building a better business, right?
Building a more
I mean,
valuable business, right?
a more
Because we focus so much. Yeah.
So as opposed to less value, like as opposed to what? And then and what I'm getting at is like how do you like walk us through some of the things that would make a business more valuable?
Yeah, I mean, is this just like as much about taking cash out and keeping cash in? Is that like one of the decision points?
I mean, that is one of them. So let me paint you a picture. Let me dumb it down. Okay.
Thank you.
Zing! That hurt. That hurt.
Listen. Okay. So I could.
I think she just got like, hold on, speak slower. I'm going to try
Chris,
to take notes. Go ahead.
So if you guys both take out your crayons, we can then we can.
Oh, Stephanie's my new favorite guest.
So I could build a business that I keep coming back to this one client who was sort of that transition client for me, where I was like, oh, all this stuff is making sense now. So she's a tidy little business, right? She's making close to 7 figures with one course that she has created based on her expertise, and she that's a tidy little business that she's got going on for one person running her business. And
I just want to acknowledge that the greatest adjective about a business that I've never used for any of our businesses, Anthony, called tidy.
Tidy little business, yes.
Yeah,
tidy little business.
Tidy. Disastrous, dumpster fire was a word. Anyway, continue.
Hoarder, I don't know.
Yeah.
So her business, I mean, if you looked at it just from a numbers perspective, she had, decent top line revenue, but her business was entirely funded by running ads, right? It was all ads. So her profitability was, fine, but not, that tells a really different story. And a lot of people hear these stories of like $1 million business, but the owner's keeping $100,000 of that. I'd rather run a business where I'm running no ads and I'm making $300,000 and I keep, $250,000 of that, that kind of thing. So what I'm saying is that the profile from the numbers doesn't tell you everything. And so when we looked at her business, and we did sort of that risk adjustment on her business, and there's like a set of like 84 questions that we would complement the SD evaluation with, and in that are all these like great opportunities. And so when we looked at diversification of her client base, she had one client, like one particular client that she sold to, and that was it. That's a benefit from a marketing perspective, but it's a risk from a buyer's perspective, because what happens if something changes in the external environment where all of a sudden that particular client is not buying, not buying something, and so she's got risk there. And then so if we change that we use the next 3 or 5 years to build out new channels, new customer base that she can serve, all of a sudden we have a more valuable business, because that risk adjustment starts to decline, right? Profitability for her, like one of our growth strategies was to find new marketing channels that didn't require her to spend, $50,000 a month on ads to get her $100,000 in revenue. So sure, that's a valid revenue channel, but where else can we find marketing channels, partnerships, collaborations, all that kind of stuff that doesn't cost her money, that can increase her profitability. So there's like, you go on and on with that, and you can find all these little like nooks and crannies where we can make it a more valuable business that has greater profitability. Yeah, of course, top line always matters, right? Yeah, how can we increase top line revenue as well? And what's the qualitative profile of the business that also affects what a buyer is going to want? Because if I'm going to buy a business, I want something that I can sustain. I want something that I can very easily grow. I want to see those opportunities inside the business. And if she built out those new channels and the new products that she was offering, all of a sudden the opportunity to grow that business increases a lot, right? So just as by way of example, like that would be one place that I would be looking at how you expand the valuation of that business, right?
It's so funny, Anthony, because what Stephanie is saying is that occasionally we need to pull ourselves out of the way that we look at our business, which is mostly entrepreneurs are very comfortable with risk. But people that buy businesses are not always comfortable with that same level of risk. And so you may be very comfortable with the fact that you found your one marketing channel and you're like, yeah, I'm just pressing go on that and it's spitting out money. But if your goal is to exit, you should probably kind of adjust that risk profile. Do you have an exercise you go through, Anthony, to kind of try to look at it from a buyer's perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, Chris, you said it perfectly. The person that starts a business and the person that buys a business are two different people, typically. And their risk profiles are completely different. Not only are your risk profiles different, you tend to be much more objective about something that you're buying into rather than something that you're starting. So you have to think about, when you're thinking about exiting a business, you have to ask yourself, would I buy this business? And what would be the things that I would be worried about? And then hopefully you go fix those if you can. Channel diversity, absolutely a critical piece of it. Systematizing your business, absolutely a piece of it. Making sure that you're not a critical component of that business being successful, believe it or not, is a critical piece.
Yeah, neutralizing a personal brand. That's one that comes up a lot, right? Especially in the online business. The business that I bought was a personal brand, and we've had to work for a couple of years to sort of de-identify that and make it a more neutralized brand. What is it when you have a podcast that's like a negative personal brand association?
It's a liability, not an asset.
Are you saying that if you hosted the podcast, Stephanie, it would just be more valuable?
I think the three of us should obviously have a regular show where we can harass each other on a regular basis, because that would be that would go from liability to asset.
I was going to say, our podcast, which is already worth nothing, Anthony, I think maybe it was not sure how that works, but yeah, suddenly.
But to your point though, the business builder's perspective on the value of their business is obviously going to be very different than a buyer's perspective on the value. Because, look, we got the curse of the expert, and we're emotionally invested in, and we think we can see how, and it's our jobs, either as a broker or as an advisor, to help that business owner translate what they've got into something from a buyer's perspective that makes sense. And I think that's the whole point of this, is let's do that early so that we're building a business. And what happens often is you come up with these strategies, and then the business owner is kind of like, but I don't like that, and I don't want to do that, and I never wanted to do that. So then we can't do it, right? So we have to come up with a different growth strategy that's still going to address those. And that's where we have to do our creative thinking and use our knowledge and our expertise as growth strategists to get to a place. And, I think having a good broker also on that side, I'm not going to do all the brokering, right? I considered going and getting my broker's license, but I decided against it. But I did get my FM. Yeah. Yeah. You know how those brokers are, right? They're all kind of
exactly.
Right. I didn't want to associate myself with that. So then I went and got my FMBA. And so I've got some credentials around valuation and that sort of thing. But it's our job to represent the best interest of whether it's the buyer or the seller that we're representing, and help guide them through. And so I think all of this thinking can get us to a better place of putting the memorandum together, or the offer letter together, that, addresses the alignment between the buyer and the seller. And I'm certainly not interested in advising my clients into deals where they're being taken advantage of, for sure. But I think if you can develop a great partnership with a broker, or with somebody who represents on the sell side or the buy side, I think you're bringing that perspective to the business owner that just probably can't see it themselves, right?
I mean, just to recap the things we've talked about, because there's a few really important things that I've taken away so far, which is, I think that the first one, Anthony, is for us as founders, we have to ask the question, It doesn't have to be on day one, but at some point along the journey is what sort of company do we want to build? And to your point, Stephanie, a lot of times that may not be a company that you want to exit. Maybe you're having fun. Maybe you want to do this for the rest of your life, and that's okay. But asking yourself that question. Second thing, and you mentioned it offhand early, Stephanie, was starting to understand what your company is worth and not being fooled into thinking it's either not valuable or you think it's way more valuable along the way. And then three, like actually taking those steps then to move your business in the direction that you as the founder want. I think so much of the time, Anthony, we just sort of get pulled along by the business when we should be shaping it to the outcome that we want to see as the founders. So, before we get into the speed round, Stephanie, I just want to give you a chance. Like, what are the practical steps? Maybe we're in year 2 or year 3 or year 4, and we're just starting to ask the questions about what we want. What can I do now to start to figure out what this is going to look like in the future? Right.
So maybe you agree with this or maybe you don't. And if you don't tell me because I'm fragile. But if, I will often do a benchmark valuation with a business owner, regardless of where they're at, because it starts to open up the conversation and see the possibilities. And it starts to open up conversations about things that are not related to just the money. And all of that sort of risk assessment and opportunities and it. So start there. And I have another an exit readiness assessment. So how ready are you to exit, and what do you? And some people are not at all, and that's totally fine. But the point is to get you start thinking along those lines, thinking from a buyer's perspective, thinking about understanding the process. And I have a whole course inside of my program that helps orient people to what a buy and a sell looks like, and then they can start thinking in those terms. But also this asset inventory, it's so interesting because a lot of business owners will come to me and they say, I don't have any assets inside my business. I'm like, yes, you do. And when we do this asset inventory and we start looking at what they've got already, there's nuggets in there that they can think about. What do I start building on now? What makes sense? I've already created all this stuff inside my business. How can I now start to work towards something that becomes valuable that I can sell off, or I can, sell as a product, or I can, build out inside my business? So I think just having those conversations about just the education around the fact that this is a possibility for you, here's what it looks like, and here are some things, practical things you can do right now that at least get you in the mindset, because it's the mindset shift that makes such a huge difference and makes you start making different decisions.
What give me an example of assets? Because, in business school, it's just about cash versus,
yes.
Your asset versus liabilities, that's your equity. But that's not what you're talking about.
No, I sort of worked backwards from what would someone pay for, right? What would someone value if they were to buy a business? So there's 9 types of assets, and I'm going to pretend that I know them all off by heart, but we're going to try. So, first of all, the obvious one would be if you have products that you are selling inside your business, whether they're physical products, digital products, something that is a product. Productized services, I would say that those are an asset because you can teach someone how to do them. You could scale those up, and they're nice in a box. So it might be a service, yes, but it's a productized service. And I've got some really great examples of people who have built businesses around those that are very sellable. An audience is an asset, right? I basically bought an audience when I bought the business that I did, whether that's an email list or it's a community or it's, eyeballs, or it's a list, or it's whatever it is. So an audience is an asset. A brand is an asset. If you have built enough recognition within your brand that it's going to give you something from recognition, then that's an asset inside your business. IP, I think one of the most interesting business models right now is where people are taking these sort of frameworks that they've built and they're figuring out how to make that sort of licensable IP, or figuring out how to teach other people how to use that framework or sell it or white label it or something like that. Really interesting business models that are starting to happen right now around that. Investments that you've made inside your business, if you've got cash investments or investments in some other way, maybe you've done sort of I come from the dot-com world where everybody just got paid in shares and
options,
whatever, maybe options. Yes. Right. So maybe you've done a trade like that and you got some ownership in another company. I think there's a couple more, but my brain's 50. And
those were great. Those were great.
I think
gives us a lot to think about.
is that there are you think like, oh, well, I'm a cash flowing business. Money comes in and it goes out.
Yeah.
And every single month I'm moving money in and out. I don't have a deep savings account. You still have assets. Like those are still.
Well, and cash flow is one of the assets. That's not the only asset.
I mean, sure,
think,
cash is an asset, but I think we all, But even like the creative work you do inside your business for the purposes of marketing. I mean, so many people have like gobs and gobs and gobs of the stuff that they've created. You start looking at it, it's all content you can create and turn into something sellable, right? Like there's so much creativity inside your business. And once we start to dig into this asset inventory, like it's pretty interesting to see where people go with that when they can start to unearth how much value there is inside their business already.
I just built our balance sheet for How to Founder, Anthony, and I valued our brand at $1.6 billion. So that's pretty good. So
oh, cool.
I think we're doing okay.
I'll get us on the market. Let's go.
That sounds great. All right, Steph.
IPO.
Let's go into this.
Can I be your first, sir?
Question 1, what do you think about our speed round graphic? Are you just sort of...
It's very masculine.
...with the show?
Very masculine.
It's really great. All right, speed round. Is owner dependency always bad, or can it be sometimes increase the business value?
Is it always bad? Owner dependency. I come from a world where there are a lot of personal brands, and I often see that you have to make a transition in order to sell that business. So I would say owner dependency is generally a risk.
SaaS company with a recurring revenue or services business with high margins, which typically commands a better multiple?
The SaaS company.
Almost always. Yeah. Better exit strategy, maximize your EBITDA or maximize growth? Growth. It's all about growth, right?
I'm terrified to answer anything other than growth after that response.
No, it's like my thought is like, build a good company. Like that's how you sell good. Yeah. It's just
I would look at that and see sustainability, right? Like an opportunity, right?
The world we came up with, it's always silly how much growth, matters, even though people.
But most businesses sell on a multiple of EBITDA. Most sell on a multiple of EBITDA.
Should you tell your team about exit plans or keep it confidential? What a great question.
My personal opinion is yes, because they all can get behind they understand what they're doing. And when they understand what they're doing, people do not value their people enough. And I really look at people as assets, and if they know what the plan is, they're going to work towards that plan and they're going to help you get there. I think most people want ownership over their work and they want to feel like they're making a difference. So this all comes down to how you position it, right?
Like, is it better to sell when you're ready to get out, or is it better to sell when you're on an emotional high and you kind of got a lot of energy going in the business?
It's better to grow when you're on an emotional high and have a lot of energy going into the business. And I think the fact that you have a plan to sell, you may be burned the F out by that point in time, but at least you've put your energy into growth as opposed to an exciting exit where you never want to talk about the business again.
A lot of wisdom there, Anthony. What did you take away from today's show?
So the fundamentals I've got are plan for an exit, even if you're not ready or don't want to exit, still should plan for it. Businesses that have good systems in place and are good at operations. So good businesses sell for more. I think that's pretty obvious. Owner dependency, right? Build yourself out of a job. Businesses that don't rely on the owner de-risks the purchase for the buyer. I also put down, buyers will pay premiums for predictable profit. So, Stephanie, you talked a lot about predictability. And then one thing I added here at the end, have clean books, like nothing exotic,
Please.
Yeah. Make it easy to understand your business's P&L and balance sheet. The less exotic those are, the more likely you are to find interested buyers.
My business is super easy to understand. I got the shoebox right there, and I put all my seats right.
I have a client that has a yurt on her on her balance sheet?
A yurt?
A
How
yurt?
do you amortize a yurt there, Stephanie?
Great question.
What's a yurt?
It's like a tent. It's like
It's more than a tent. It's like a permanent structure that is like a hexagon, and it provides you shelter from the elements.
Yeah, but I imagine trying to figure out an amortization.
That sounds like a word Jerry Lewis made up. I don't even believe that's a word. I don't believe either one of you guys.
How do you live in Colorado and you don't know what a yurt is?
I know what a yurt is. Like Anthony went camping one time, and then got kicked out of the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, and then I went to Olive Garden for dinner.
But the breadsticks were delicious. All right, the deep dive recommendations, Built to Sell by John Werlow. By then, Bill Axe actually kind of different.
Walker Dibel's book
is Walker Dibel. Profit First by Michael Michalowicz. I always get that one wrong. That's pretty good. And there's a very good Harvard Business Review article called Harvard Business Review, How to Prepare Your Business. And of course, Stephanie, we're going to go get all your free resources. We're going to get so much smarter, but where do we find it?
You can find me at stephaniehayes.biz or on LinkedIn. I have a very new Substack that I just put together called Exit Intent. And I am going to be setting up a new podcast called Interviews, and I'll probably ask you guys to be on it.
I was going to say by the end of this one, it probably won't. And is your cat going to be your co-host?
Because I used to have a piano behind my desk, and he would walk along it, and so all my clients called him Sad Piano Cat. So the problem is he's so attached to me that if I leave him, he starts meowing, and then that's annoying on the show. So he'll just sit on my lap.
Anthony does when I leave. It's really sad.
Does he purr as well?
Yeah,
Does he rub up against you?
Yeah, it's a very sad thing. Really fun conversation. Again, tell us one more time. And stephaniehayes.biz, is that right?
Biz. B-I-Z,
awesome.
yeah.
And all the cool resources that are there. Anthony, assuming the fact that the word hasn't gotten out and all of our guests cancel, what is coming up next?
So we're going to be talking next episode about no-nonsense growth hacks. Chris, something you know nothing about. We're going to talk about growth marketing.
I'm still looking forward to that.
It's
going to be great.
Looking forward to that. Stephanie, thank you. I really thank you. This was a great episode. I even though I do this stuff, I still learn some stuff from you. So that's great. For those of you watching, just a reminder, visit us at howtofounder.com. And go like us or subscribe to us on Apple. From that website, you can like us and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Please, for Chris's mental health, leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to grow that channel, and Chris's income from this show is directly related to directly related to that. And with that, guys, again, thank you as always for joining us. We'll see you next time. Take care. Stephanie, thanks again.